Okay, let's dive in. We operate under the assumption that reality is, well, pretty predictable, right? A mechanical system governed by forces we understand.
Cause and effect, yeah. Things stay put unless you push them. Our minds just sort of watch.
Exactly. But what if that picture isn't quite complete? What if reality is, like Arthur Eddington said, stranger than we can imagine?
That's a perfect way to frame it because the source material we're digging into today, it really challenges that conventional view.
It takes us into some pretty weird territory.
Definitely. Where the mind might not just be a passenger, but maybe subtly influencing things. An agent.
Right. And we've got a lot of interesting research here. It's from the field of psi, specifically from researchers who've spent decades looking into psychokinesis PK.
The idea that consciousness, maybe intention, can directly affect the physical world.
And the key thing, which the sources emphasize, is they've tried to use scientific methods. Statistical analysis, controlled experiments, lots of data.
Right. It's not just anecdotes, though some of it started there. They really tried to apply rigor.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to unpack what these sources actually reveal. What's the evidence? What are the theories? What are the methods they used?
We'll look at different types of PK, how they studied it, from tiny effects to maybe group effects, even potential links to quantum physics. It gets pretty deep.
It sounds like it. It definitely pushes the boundaries of what mainstream science usually talks about.
For sure. But these researchers have mapped out this territory in, well, surprising detail.
Okay, so where do we start? The sources make a distinction right off the bat between macropsychokinesis and micropsychokinesis.
Yeah, that's crucial. Macro PK, macropsychokinesis, that's the big stuff, things you can see directly.
Like levitation, moving objects.
Exactly. Telekinesis, spoon bending, maybe even psychophotography, getting images on film just by thinking.
The kind of thing you see in movies or, stage shows.
Pretty much. And the sources are clear. While that's captivating stuff, the experimental side of macro PK has often been, well, problematic.
Hard to control.
Hard to control, results often ambiguous, and unfortunately there have been cases of fraud, people faking it.
Which leads researchers, based on our sources, to focus much more on the other kind, micropsychokinesis.
Exactly. Micro PK.
Exactly.
This is where most of the serious, statistically driven research has happened.
So what is micro PK then, if it's not moving tables?
It's about influencing random systems at a really small level. Microphysical, things you can't just watch and see move.
Like what, for example?
Like the output of genuinely random electronic devices, or even, as we'll get into, maybe the behavior of quantum events themselves. The effects are subtle.
So subtle you need statistics to even detect them.
Precisely. You need lots and lots of trials, careful analysis to see if there's a deviation from what pure chance would predict.
Okay. And when we talk about applying scientific methods here, the name Dr. Joseph Banks Rhine comes up a lot in the sources, right?
Yeah.
Back in the 1930s at Duke.
Absolutely. He was really the pioneer in bringing proper statistical methods to study micro-PK.
And the story goes, it started with a gambler.
Yeah, the source mentions this anecdote. A gambler came to Rhine, convinced he could sometimes influence dice rolls with his mind. Rhine, being a psychologist, saw a chance to test this old belief scientifically.
And the initial results were promising enough.
Apparently intriguing enough for Rhine to launch a whole research program that lasted years. He really tried to eliminate normal explanations.
Like using special cups for throwing the dice. Or machines.
Exactly. Unbalanced dice were screened out. They used cups, later even power-driven rotating cages, to automate the throws and remove any possibility of skillful throwing.
And the task for participants was simple.
Conceptually, yes. Just try to mentally will the dice to land on a specific face, one they chose beforehand, more often than chance.
And they collected a lot of data doing this.
A huge amount. Rhine and others using similar methods, which leads to a major review, a meta-analysis mentioned in the sources, by Dean Radin and Diane Ferrari in the early 90s.
What did that analysis cover?
It pooled data from 73 different micro-PK studies done between the 1940s and 50s, 52 different researchers involved.
Wow.
Yeah, 148 separate experiments in total covering, get this, 2.6 million individual dice throws.
2.6 million. Okay, that's a massive data set. What did it show?
It showed a small effect, definitely not large, but statistically highly significant.
How significant?
The combined results deviated from chance expectation with odds of about 1 in a billion against it being just random luck.
1 in a billion. Okay, that's
Right.
not trivial. But could it just be some kind of artifact from combining studies?
That's always a concern with meta-analysis, but the source highlights something important. the control conditions.
What about them?
In the experiments where participants were not trying to influence the dice, there was no significant deviation from chance. The effect only seemed to appear when intention was applied.
So the difference between trying and not trying was key.
Exactly. That comparison is crucial in this research. It's the deviation from the random baseline during the intention phase that they point to.
Okay, so dice studies showed something statistically interesting. How did the research evolve with technology? Did they move beyond dice?
They did. The next big leap was moving from mechanical systems like dice, which always have some slight physical imperfections, to truly random electronic processes.
Random number generators.
RNGs.
Exactly. Helmut Schmidt, a physicist working at Boeing Labs, was key here. In the late 1950s, he developed the first RNGs specifically for these mind-matter interaction studies.
And these RNGs are based on quantum randomness. Is that right?
Often, yes. They typically use inherently unpredictable quantum phenomena, like radioactive decay timing or electronics thermal noise. This generates random electronic pulses.
Which get converted into just random zeros and ones.
Basically, yeah. A stream of random bits, hundreds or thousands per second. It's designed to be as close to perfectly random as possible. So instead of willing a 6-4 on a die, participants are trying to make the RNG produce more ones than zeros or something like that.
That's the typical setup. Focus your intention, more ones or more zeros. They usually get some kind of feedback sounds, graphics to see how they're doing, run hundreds of trials. It's very automated now.
And like the dice studies, decades of data were collected using RNGs too.
Oh, absolutely. And again, the sources point to a major meta-analysis, this one by Dean Radin and Roger Nilsson from Princeton, published in 1989.
What did that cover?
RNG studies from 1959 up to 1987. We're talking 597 studies by 68 different researchers. They analyzed 653 individual experimental tests.
Another huge data set. And the bottom line.
The combined probability against the results being due to chance was calculated at about 1 in 33 million.
1 in 33 million. So, again, statistically very strong, even if the effect itself is small.
Exactly. Consistent deviation from chance linked to intention across many labs, many researchers over decades.
Okay, which leads us naturally to the peer lab. Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, Robert John and his group, they did a lot of RNG work, didn't they?
They did. Arguably the most extensive and long-term program focused specifically on this. Their own internal meta-analysis covered 12 years of their RNG experiments.
How many people were involved?
Over 100 participants in that analysis. The standard task was similar. Try to mentally influence the RNG output to go significantly higher than the chance baseline, the high intention, or significantly lower the low intention.
And what did their massive data set show?
It showed exactly that pattern. The RNG output consistently deviated slightly upwards during the high intention runs and slightly downwards during the low intention runs.
Slightly, you emphasize.
Yes, the effect per trial was tiny, but accumulated over millions and millions of trials.
The statistical significance became huge.
Astronomical. Their calculation put the odds against chance at 35 billion to 1.
35 billion, that's hard to even grasp. But again, does that mean someone could use this to, say, predict lottery numbers?
No, definitely not based on the size of the effects seen here. That's a common misunderstanding. The sources stress it's not about a powerful, practical force you can easily command.
It's about the consistency.
It's the sheer statistical weight. Countless trials, many studies, different researchers, all showing this tiny, consistent nudge away from pure randomness when intention is involved. It challenges the basic assumption that these systems are only random.
It's the existence of the signal, however faint, that's the point.
Precisely, the persistence of that small signal.
And didn't the peer lab find something really strange about distance?
Yes. This is where it starts to get really counterintuitive, physically speaking. In some of their RNG experiments, the participant wasn't even in the lab.
How far away?
Sometimes thousands of kilometers away from the RNG device. And the surprising finding was the size of the effect didn't seem to decrease with distance.
Wait, so someone on the other side of the planet could potentially influence the RNG just as much as someone sitting next to it?
According to their data, yes, that's what they reported. Which suggests this interaction, whatever it is, might be non-local.
Non-local, meaning it doesn't seem bound by space in the way we think of normal forces like gravity or magnetism, which get weaker with distance.
Exactly. That's a profound implication if true. It really pushes against standard physics.
Okay, so if individual intention might have this non-local influence on random systems, What happens if you get a whole group of people focusing? Does that change anything?
That was the logical next question. And Roger Nelson, also associated with Pierre, really explored this starting in the mid-90s. He looked into what's called a collective attention effect.
Collective attention effect.
Yeah.
How do they think about that? Is it just adding up individual intentions?
Not exactly. It's often framed using the idea of fields of consciousness.
Fields like gravitational fields.
Sort of analogous, yeah. A theoretical concept, the source clarifies, like fields in physics, but maybe generated by coherent mental activity, especially from groups of people thinking or feeling the same thing at the same time.
Echoes of older ideas, too.
Definitely. You see parallels with concepts like the Vedic idea of Brahman, a kind of universal consciousness underlying individual minds.
So the hypothesis is that when a group is really connected, really focused together.
Right, like during a powerful ritual or visiting a sacred site or even just singing together or listening intently to a moving speech. Dean Radin suggests individual minds seem to temporarily merge into a kind of group thought, collective mental coherence.
And this collective coherence itself might affect nearby random systems like RNGs, even if the group isn't trying to influence the machine.
That's the idea they tested. In these studies, RNGs are just left running, collecting data continuously. Then researchers look for deviations from randomness that happen to correlate with times when a group nearby is known to be engaged in some highly engaging, attention-focusing activity.
So the group members usually don't even know the RNG is there.
Often, no. The focus isn't on their intention towards the RNG, but on the state of collective attention itself, possibly creating a field effect.
Interesting. What have these collective effects studies found?
There have been over 100 studies looking at this now. And the source says the overall results show a statistically significant effect, a deviation from chance with odds greater than 1,000,000 to 1 against it being random.
So something seems to be happening when groups get collectively focused.
It appears so, statistically. But, as you might guess, it's complicated.
How so? Is it hard to measure when a group is really focused?
Exactly. That's a big challenge. The results from these studies are more variable than the individual intention studies. What the group is doing, who's in the group, the environment, it probably all matters. Dean Radin suggested maybe the difficulty is pinpointing the exact moments of peak coherence.
Which led him to collaborate with Skip Atwater at the Monroe Institute, because they work with sounds designed to synchronize brainwaves.
Precisely. The Monroe Institute uses hemisync, which involves binaural beats. The idea was, could these sounds reliably create the kind of collective coherence that an RNG might pick up?
Okay, quick refresher. Binaural sounds or beats. How do they work again?
Sure. You listen through stereo headphones to two slightly different frequencies, say 500 hertz in one ear, 505 hertz in the other. Your brain perceives a third frequency, the difference 5 hertz in this case.
Even though that 5 hertz sound isn't actually being played.
Right, it's generated in your brain. And the research suggests listening to these beats can encourage your brain waves to synchronize at that difference frequency, potentially leading to states of relaxation, focus, or altered awareness. That's the basis of hemisync.
Got it. So Radin and Atwater thought, if a group listens to hemisync, their brains might synchronize, creating collective coherence, and that state might affect an RNG.
That was the hypothesis. They set up a study during the Monroe Institute's Gateway Voyage program, an intense week-long consciousness exploration course. Participants, about 20 of them, listened to hemisync sounds individually for hours daily, then met for group discussions.
And the prediction was the RNG effect would be stronger during those listening and discussion periods.
Stronger than during, say, meals or sleep, when attention was less focused and collective.
How did they check that?
They ran an RNG continuously for 14 weekends when the Gateway program was happening, and compared that data to 8 control weekends with no program. Participants mostly didn't know about the RNG. They ended up with a massive amount of data, 108 billion random bits.
108 billion. And the result?
The correlation analysis worked out as hypothesized. There was a statistically significant effect during the program weekend's odds, about 500 to 1 against chance.
And during the control weekends?
No significant effect. Plus, they had another RNG placed far away from the institute, and it showed no effect either.
So that suggests this collective effect, at least in this setup, might be more localized, unlike the individual non-local findings.
Exactly. That's a really interesting nuance. It suggests different types of PK phenomena might operate differently regarding space and distance. Fascinating.
What factors generally seem to influence the strength of these collective effects?
The sources point to 2 main things. One, how tightly focused the group's attention is on the same thing, a shared object, event, or feeling. More focus, more coherence, potentially stronger effect.
And the other.
Just the number of people. Larger groups showing collective coherence seem to correlate with a bigger deviation in the RNG data. Scale seems to matter.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Away from electronic random systems and groups, the sources also cover the work of Masaru Emoto. His focus was water.
Yes, Masaru Emoto, a Japanese author and independent researcher. His work became very well known. He had this theory about water being sensitive to thoughts, emotions, even words.
And he developed a specific way to visualize this by freezing water.
That's right. His method involved taking small water samples, freezing them in petri dishes under controlled conditions to form tiny ice droplets, and then photographing the resulting ice crystals under magnification.
What did he first notice just doing that with different water sources?
He reported really striking differences. Water from pristine natural sources tended to form beautiful, complex, symmetrical hexagonal crystals.
The water from polluted sources.
It often formed incomplete, distorted crystals, where sometimes no crystals at all, just sort of messy, frozen shapes.
Okay, so that was the baseline. Then he started deliberately exposing water to different things, like thoughts or music.
Exactly. That became his main line of inquiry. He believed water could somehow register the energy or information from thoughts, feelings, written words, images, music, you name it.
So he'd label water bottles with words like love or hate, or play music to them.
Yes, things like that. And his initial findings, which he published in popular books with photos, seemed to show a clear pattern.
Positive influences led to beautiful crystals, negative ones to ugly ones.
That was the claim. Water exposed to love, positive intentions, or classical music like Bach supposedly formed beautiful, harmonious crystals. Water exposed to hate, negative thoughts, or jarring music like heavy metal reportedly formed deformed, unattractive structures.
His books and photos became quite famous, right? He was in that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know?
He was. His work reached a huge audience. But, scientifically speaking, his early methods faced criticism.
Potential for bias, like knowing which water got which treatment.
Exactly, experiment to expectancy effect. If the person freezing or photographing the water knew which sample was which, they might subconsciously influence the process or select the best photos.
But our sources say he later worked with Dean Radin to tighten up the methodology.
Yes, that's a critical development. To address the criticisms, Radin helped implement proper blinding procedures.
Meaning
The person photographing the crystals didn't know which sample was treated versus control. The judges evaluating the photos for aesthetic quality also didn't know, and the person analyzing the scores was blind too. Double blind, essentially.
Okay, tell us about one of those more controlled studies.
Sure. One involved about 2,000 people in Tokyo. They focused positive intentions, thoughts of gratitude and love towards specific water samples located inside an electromagnetically shielded room in California at the Institute of Noetic Sciences.
Thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
And there were control samples.
Yes. Identical water samples kept in the same institute but not targeted by the intention, and the participants didn't know about them.
And then the blind evaluation.
Right. The water was frozen, crystals photographed under blind conditions. Then 100 independent judges, also blind, rated the aesthetic beauty of the crystal photos.
The result.
The crystals from the water that received the intention from Tokyo were judged, on average, as significantly more beautiful than the crystals from the control water.
Wow. Even with the distance and the blinding. Was that replicated?
It was. A follow-up study had 1,900 people in Austria and Germany send positive intentions to water bottles in that same California lab. Again, control bottles were used. This time, 2,500 independent judges blindly rated the photos.
And same result.
Similar result, yes. The crystals from the treated water were consistently rated as more aesthetically pleasing, more symmetrical, well-formed, attractive than the control crystals.
Given that our bodies are mostly water, the sources suggest these findings, if they hold up, could be really significant, maybe for health.
It certainly opens that door, doesn't it? If our thoughts and emotions can influence the structure of water, it raises deep questions about the mind-body connection. How might our internal states affect our physical selves at a fundamental level?
Okay, so we have micro-PK on random systems, hints of non-locality, these water crystal studies. It all seems to point towards mind influencing matter, especially at subtle levels, which inevitably brings us to quantum mechanics.
Yes, this is where the conversation often goes, because quantum mechanics itself is so strange and observer-dependent.
The core weirdness being
That quantum objects Electrons, photons, things like that seem to exist in a fuzzy state of potential, like a wave spread out, until you measure or observe them. Then they suddenly snap into a definite state, like a particle at a specific location.
The famous double-slit experiment illustrates this, right?
Perfectly. Fire single photons at a screen through two slits. Don't watch which slit they go through. You get an interference pattern wave behavior.
But if you put detectors at the slits to see which path each photon takes,
the interference pattern vanishes. You just get two bands, like particles going through one slit or the other. The very act of observing which path changes the outcome.
it's like the photon knows it's being watched.
In a manner of speaking, it behaves differently depending on how or if it's observed. This is the quantum measurement problem. It's not just that observing disturbs it. Observation seems to somehow create the definite reality from the possibilities.
The collapse of the wave function.
Right. That probabilistic wave collapses into a single actuality upon measurement.
Which really messes with our common sense idea of an objective world that's just out there, whether we look or not.
It absolutely does. It shook physics profoundly. And it led some of the founders of quantum theory, Bohr, Pauli, von Neumann, even Schrödinger, to seriously consider if consciousness itself was the key. Was consciousness necessary to collapse the wave function, to turn quantum potential into concrete reality?
Though most physicists today look for other explanations.
Yeah. Yes, interpretations that don't involve consciousness are more common now. But the question hasn't entirely gone away. Some thinkers, like John Wheeler, even proposed ideas like the participatory anthropic principle, basically suggesting that observers are necessary for the universe to even come into being. Consciousness is fundamental.
Deep stuff. And this potential link between observation, consciousness, and quantum effects is something Dean Radin investigated directly, using that double-slit setup.
He did, yeah. He and his colleagues set up a double-slit optical system and hypothesized. If consciousness is involved in wave function collapse, then focusing attention directly on the double slit should change the interference pattern.
How so?
They predicted that focused attention would make the light behave more like particles and less like waves, meaning the intensity of the interference fringes should decrease.
So could intention influence a basic quantum process?
That was the test. In their first published study, they had 137 volunteers. In different runs, people were asked to either focus their attention on the double slit system while it was running or focus their attention away from it.
And what happened to the interference pattern?
When participants focused on the slits, the intensity of the interference pattern significantly decreased, just as predicted. The odds against chance were about 184,000 to 1.
And critically, control runs without people observing
showed no effect, which helps rule out it just being some weird artifact of the machine itself.
That sounds like pretty direct evidence linking attention to a quantum effect.
It's certainly suggestive. The study, published in Physics Essays, also found correlations. People with meditation experience, or who reported feeling very focused during the task, tended to show a larger effect. Open-mindedness about the possibility also correlated.
And they didn't just do it once, they did an online replication.
Yes. A major follow-up. They streamed the data from a similar double-slit system live over the internet. People from all over the world could participate.
How many people?
Almost 1,500 participants from 77 countries in nearly 3,000 sessions. They'd watch a real-time signal related to the interference level and try to influence it with their attention or just observe passively.
And the results held up.
Statistically, yes. Similar outcome to the first study. And here's that non-locality hint again. The effect size, the influence of attention, didn't seem to depend on how far away the person was from the actual experiment in California.
Could be next door or on the other side of the world.
Seemed not to matter. Distances ranged from 1 kilometer to 10,000 kilometers. And again, thousands of computer-simulated control sessions showed nothing.
This recurrence of distance independence in both RNG and quantum observation studies is really striking, isn't it? It really challenges our standard physical models.
It's one of the most persistent and puzzling findings in the whole field. It strongly suggests that whatever this mind-matter interaction is, it's not working through any known force that diminishes with distance.
So if consciousness can perhaps influence quantum events, could the brain itself, the generator of consciousness, be utilizing quantum mechanics in some fundamental way?
That's the next logical theoretical leap, right? Trying to find a quantum basis for consciousness within the brain. John von Neumann himself, back in the 30s, suggested the observer in QM ultimately had to include the consciousness of the physicist, not just their instruments.
And others built on that idea.
Yes, people like Eugene Wigner, and more recently, the theoretical physicist Henry Stapp. Stapp has a detailed model proposing quantum effects happen within the tiny ion channels in neuron membranes.
Because they're so small.
Exactly. Nanometer scale. He argues their opening and closing, crucial for nerve impulses, might be governed by quantum rules, not just classical physics.
And how does consciousness fit in?
Stapp suggests that focused, goal-directed attention, our conscious will, might directly modulate the quantum state collapse within these ion channels, effectively steering neuronal activity. It's his proposed mechanism for free will. Controversial, of course.
Are there other models trying to find quantum effects in brain mechanisms?
Yes. The neuroscientist Sir John Eccles, a Nobel Prize winner, worked with physicist Friedrich Beck. They focused on the release of neurotransmitters from tiny packets called vesicles at the synapse.
Also very small scale.
Right. They proposed the probability of a vesicle releasing its chemical signals could be influenced by quantum processes, potentially modulated by intention.
Eccles also had that idea about dendrins and cycons.
He did, a more dualistic model. He imagined functional units of dendrites, called dendrins, interacting with non-physical units of mental experience, called psychons. Intentional thought, psychons, could influence the quantum probabilities at the synapse via the dendrins.
So these models look for specific, tiny points in brain function where quantum rules might apply and consciousness could potentially interact.
Exactly. They're looking for a quantum lever for the mind within the brain's machinery, but they generally don't say consciousness is a quantum process itself.
Unlike the Penrose-Hameroff model. That one's different.
Very different. Roger Penrose, the physicist, and Stuart Hameroff, the anesthesiologist, proposed that consciousness arises from a specific type of quantum process.
Not observer-caused collapse, but something else.
Right. Penrose proposed objective reduction, a self-collapse of quantum states due to gravitational effects, he argues. And they propose this happens inside microtubules.
Microtubules, the tiny protein tubes inside cells, including neurons.
Yes. They argue tubulin proteins within microtubules can hold quantum superposition states, and that the structure is suited for maintaining quantum coherence long enough for this objective reduction to occur. Each reduction, they suggest, corresponds to a moment of conscious experience.
And they claim this explains consciousness, maybe even free will.
That's the claim. It's ambitious, but the model faces pretty strong criticism, which our sources detail.
What are the main issues?
Well, first, microtubules are everywhere, in almost all cells, not just brain cells. Why aren't liver cells conscious then? Second, many anesthetics work without apparently affecting microtubules directly. Third, damaging microtubules doesn't seem to abolish consciousness entirely. Fourth, there's no real evidence linking microtubules to big shifts like waking and sleeping.
And the author of our source adds another critique.
A philosophical one. That even though it uses quantum physics, it's still deeply reductionist. It tries to boil down mind and consciousness to just quantum events in these tiny tubes. Perhaps, the author suggests, even more reductionist than saying consciousness emerges from the whole brain network's activity.
So the idea of a quantum brain is theoretically appealing to some, but specific models face major hurdles, experimentally and conceptually.
That seems to be the consensus reflected in the sources. It's an active area of theorizing, but solid evidence for these specific brain mechanisms is lacking.
Okay, one last area the sources cover, moving back from pure theory to experiments again. The work of William Tiller. He was a materials science professor at Stanford.
That's right, Professor Emeritus. Highly respected in his field, particularly crystallization science. But he felt his mainstream work only scratched the surface of reality.
So he pursued other research on the side.
Yes, starting back in the 70s, he began independent research into how human intention might affect physical materials.
And he developed some kind of device, an intention host device.
Yes. Described as a small electronic device, you plug it in near a target material, say water that you want to influence. Tiller believed this device could be imprinted or loaded with a specific intention.
Loaded? How?
The process involved a small group of people meditating or focusing very intently on the desired outcome, the specific intention, for about 15 minutes near the device. He believed this focused collective intention got stored in the device somehow.
Stored and then emitted.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
The device would then continue to influence the nearby target material according to that imprinted intention over time.
And he tested this by trying to change the pH of water.
He did. pH measures acidity or alkalinity. In one experiment, the intention loaded was to increase the water's pH by 1 full point. He reported that over several months, the water near the activated device did indeed show a pH increase of about 1 unit compared to control water.
And he tried decreasing it too.
Yes, a separate experiment aimed to decrease the pH by 1 unit, and he reported that was also successful.
Were these results published? Replicated?
The source states these pH results were published in peer-reviewed journals and were reportedly replicated by independent groups in London, Milan, and at the University of Florida.
Okay, that's interesting. Replicated findings of an intention-imprinted device changing water chemistry. How does Tiller himself explain this?
He argues forcefully that these results cannot be explained by current physics. Not quantum mechanics as we know it, not the standard forces.
So he thinks it points to something else entirely.
Yes. He believes it's evidence for what he calls subtle energies or forces, maybe even different dimensions or levels of reality that science hasn't properly accounted for yet. His work involves developing a theoretical framework to include these subtler aspects.
All right, let's try to pull all these threads together. It's been a pretty wide-ranging deep dive into the source material on psychokinesis.
It really has. We went from the early distinctions between macro and micro PK through Rhine's foundational dice work and the statistical evidence found there,
To the more modern RNG studies using quantum randomness, pioneered by Schmidt, extensively researched at Peer, again showing small but statistically significant effects.
and that puzzling non-local finding from Peer, where distance didn't seem to weaken the individual effect.
Then we look at collective attention effects. Roger Nelson's work suggesting group coherence might influence random systems, possibly locally, as seen in the Monroe Institute study.
We touched on Masaru Emoto's controversial but intriguing water crystal work, and the controlled studies with Radin suggesting intention could influence water structure, even remotely.
Then the dive into quantum mechanics, the observer effect, the measurement problem, and how consciousness might fit in, supported perhaps by Radin's double-slit experiments showing attention correlating with quantum behavior changes, again with hints of non-locality.
We explored theoretical models trying to locate quantum effects in the brainstem, Eccles, Penrose-Hameroff, while noting the significant criticisms they face.
And finally, William Tiller's work with his intention device and the reported replicated effects on water pH pointing towards potentially new physics or subtle energies.
Across all these different lines of research, different methods, different phenomena, the sources consistently point to this persistent, statistically anomalous signal.
A signal suggesting that mind, consciousness, intention, whatever term you prefer, might interact with the physical world in ways we don't fully understand. Often subtly, often at micro levels, maybe non-locally, maybe amplified by collective coherence.
Yeah, the cumulative weight of the evidence presented in these sources, especially from the meta-analyses, challenges the simple materialist assumption that mind is purely an emergent property of matter with no ability to influence it back directly.
It certainly paints a picture of reality that's, well, more complex, more interconnected, maybe stranger, as Eddington put it, than the standard model allows for.
It doesn't give us all the answers, by any means. No unified theory emerges easily. But it strongly suggests there's something here worth investigating further about consciousness and its place in the cosmos.
So for you listening, here's something to think about. Considering all these possibilities we've discussed, the idea that observing reality might actually help shape it at the quantum level, the evidence that focused individual or group attention can subtly bias random physical systems, even the notion that intention might leave an imprint on water or be captured by a device. What could all this mean?
If these effects are real, even if small, what might they imply about the fundamental nature of consciousness? Is it just a computation running on brain hardware? Or is it something more fundamental, perhaps woven into the fabric of the universe in ways we're only beginning to glimpse?
How might exploring these possibilities change your own perspective on your mind, your thoughts, and your connection to the world around you? What further questions does this deep dive into the source material raise for you?